Well, here we are on Monday. Yesterday, Jesus entered Jerusalem in all his glory, but today we actually see him in all humanness. We see him hungry and we see him angry. I love this actually, that in this lead up to his death and resurrection, Jesus was demonstrating something of his humanness, God come to earth as man, and giving us things to identify with him over, that we can know that although he was glorious, although he rose again, he was just a man who suffered on our behalf and understands deeply where we're at. Let's read the passage for today from Mark 11, starting at verse 12. The next day, as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. Seeing in the distance a fig tree in leaf, he went to find out if it had any fruit. When he reached it, he found nothing but leaves, because it was not the season for figs. And then he said to the tree, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And his disciples heard him say it. On reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple area and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. And as he taught them, he said, "Is it not written, 'My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations'? But you have made it a den of robbers." The chief priests and the teachers of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him, for they feared him, because the whole crowd was amazed at his teaching. When evening came, they went out of the city. So first of all, we see Jesus hungry. He wanted his breakfast. He'd got up and he was walking into Jerusalem and he was hungry. He was human. He was hungry and he wanted some breakfast. So he went to try and get some breakfast from this fig tree that was in leaf, and he found no figs. And it seemingly made him angry. Maybe hungry. I get hungry when I'm hungry in the morning. And he cursed the fig tree and he said, "You're not going to bear any more fruit." What is that all about? We're going to come back to it in a minute. But then we see Jesus go on to Jerusalem, and really we see him getting angry here. And a lot of people struggle with this passage because Jesus really gets angry, and we see him act out on that anger as well. He's turning tables over, he's releasing the birds, he's shouting. He's telling people what he really thinks. And that doesn't match up with our image of this perfect Jesus who never sins, does it? It's really uncomfortable for us. But I believe that Jesus does never sin, and yet he did get angry, and he acted on his anger. And that anger was because of injustice. What was happening in the temple is that the leaders in the temple were allowing the poorest of the poor, those to be ripped off. Basically, wherever people were coming from with their own currency, they were changing that to temple currency at just ridiculous rates. And so people were having to pay a massive amount of money to come and then buy the doves or whatever they needed to sacrifice at really high prices. And it was shutting the poorest out of the temple and out of worshipping God. And we see Jesus say here, "I want my house to be a house of prayer for all people of all nations." He was so angry that the leaders were allowing the poorest to be shut out of worship and shut out of prayer and be treated so abysmally. I wonder, do we allow ourselves to become that angry over injustice when the least among us are being treated badly, are being treated unfairly, are being ripped off, and not being looked after? Throughout the Bible, it's clear that this is something that God cares about. Let's allow ourselves to be stirred up by that, to be awake to injustice that's happening, and to speak up in anger to those in authority and say no more. That is what Jesus modelled to us. No more is what he said. And coming back to that fig tree, it's widely agreed that Jesus was hungry. But what was happening there was a prophetic sign to the Jewish faith that you have not been fruitful. You have not loved as I want you to love. You have not shown compassion as I want you to show compassion. You have not shown justice as I want you to show justice. You have not borne the fruit that I want of you. And so you are no more. You are not going to be allowed to operate like that anymore. I am doing a new thing. And we see Jesus later this week bring that in, a new kingdom, a new way of doing things. Let's be prepared to let Jesus challenge us when we are not being fruitful, when we are not living the way that he wants us to live. As individuals, as a church, we need to open our eyes to the things that God wants us to be doing in order to be fruitful, to love the poor, to have compassion, to show justice, to be fully human alongside other humans.